I also understand that people have other things going on in their lives, and it's not about me. But neither of these things have been helping with keeping my spirits up. I tend to become passive-aggressive, or I just shut down. Any advice?
Another great question that I can personally relate to.
You can personally relate to this?
Yeah, I mean, anybody who's done any kind of work in
with other humans.
Retail,
retail,
or the food industry.
Oh, yeah.
If you've ever waited tables, that you see the worst of humanity.
Yeah, no,
and
they do not care.
Yeah, you can absolutely just think the world is an evil, horrible place. I actually worked when I was in graduate school.
Is this the rental car story?
Yes.
I knew you were going to bring that up. I was totally thinking flight attendants and rental car people just get the worst side of humanity.
Yeah. So I worked at a rental car agency at an airport, and dealing with people at the airport is incredibly frustrating because they're tired, they've been traveling. And it's weird even sometimes how delusional people will get. You know, for me, flying in an airplane, safety is like my first concern. Like convenience is always second.
Yeah.
I want to be safe. But there's so many times that, you know, I would hear people say, they would come on the intercom and announce like, I'm sorry, we can't take off. The wing fell off. And then people are just like, let's just go.
Yeah.
Come
and you're
on.
like, no, this is good. Thank you for the heads up.
Yeah.
You take all the time you need.
Yeah, people do not need any kind of rational excuse for anything. It's terrible.
Yeah.
So I can totally understand working in that environment, how you could just lose faith in humanity. So one thing I would really encourage our listener to do, there's a lot of different types of coping skills, and coping skills can kind of be broken down into like 6 different categories. And one of the categories is called accessing your higher self.
Okay.
And essentially what that's about is it's kind of like giving back. Mm-hmm. Okay. So if you want to see, if you get stuck in this situation, well, let me back up. The easy solution to this would be find a different job.
Right.
But I'm not a big proponent of that.
Don't run away.
Yeah. I like to see people evolve, adapt.
Rise to it.
Yeah. Rise to the occasion, learn some healthy coping skills for that environment. But I would say that it sounds like you need to get out of that environment a little bit more often and experiencing some new things. Mm-hmm. So with that coping skill strategy of accessing your higher self, we're talking about volunteering. Mm. If you want to see humanity in a better light, put yourself in that situation where you can see humanity in a better light. Get involved with organizations that are meant to help people, and you really get to see a different,
like a reality check.
Right. Yeah.
That's
you get to see a different perspective.
I like that.
I used to work at a treatment center for adolescents, teenagers.
That's tough.
It's very tough. And, there were some success stories, and that was great. But overall, after working there for about a year, I started feeling like, man, I just do not have a whole lot of hope for the future.
Right, yeah.
But I had to realize, I had to get out of that situation to realize that I'm only looking at a small percentage of the population. Yeah. I got involved with this group that was through the school district, and it was students who were creating, I don't remember exactly what they were doing, but it was like a community-based group that was led by the students, but with community members.
I see. And it's a different side of seeing the same kids or same demographic, but in a positive light.
Exactly. So I would have interactions with these kids, and I'm thinking, oh my God, these kids are brilliant. Right. Yeah. And then I was like, I have been looking at this all wrong.
Right. So, Nick, another thing I think that you and I immediately relate to this. This person works in food and retail, but we look back on our lives and say, at one point you're working at a rental car place, you've worked with teenagers, that was the same thing. I was a school teacher, I saw the same thing. But as a therapist, I think we experience the same thing.
Sure.
Because it's called compassion fatigue. And compassion fatigue is something that therapists actually train in to make sure that we're aware of, because we expect it to happen at some point, especially because we work in healthcare. Nobody's coming to see us because their lives are going so great. Nobody's on a winning streak, when they come to see us. There's bad things happening in their lives, and they're incomplete people who usually have some pretty strong character defects that we need to work on together. And we're in charge of confronting and dealing with that person in their raw humanity. And a lot of times that can feel like you're working at the DMV or working at the ER, and every person that comes in is sick and hurting and unhappy and scared. And so no matter what your sector that you work in out there, I think the advice is the same. where you start with identifying this. There is such a thing as compassion fatigue. There is such a thing as being the punching bag or the welcome mat, and it hurts, because you're always the one that gets encountering some negativity out of other people. But I like Nick's advice, which is to break away from that and get a broader perspective on life. That's essential for your own humanity, is that you don't get stuck inside that cave and begin to believe that this is all it is. The world has to be bigger than that, and it's important that you broaden your horizon. If not, leave the career. But I don't think you can just run away from mean people. I think they're always going to be there. But the other thing that I would add to this is leaning in on the relationships. And I've noticed for me, whenever people are cantankerous or difficult or thorny, there's a desire to sort of lean away and just kind of get away from this thing. But I've noticed that whenever I become proactive in that relationship and try to take control of it in a positive way, people tend to mimic what I'm doing. And so if I come in with positivity that's sincere and not like this saccharine fakeness where I'm like, everything's great, but when I come in and just, start with a positive attitude, I'm intentional about smiling with people. I'm intentional about joining with them quickly, which is a therapeutic term. It means to break through their walls and create an alliance in a sense. And I believe that I was a server. I used to be a food server. And I would do that at my tables, even though I wasn't a therapist at the time. I didn't have that training. But because I got so sick and tired of people beating up on me and just always being mad, that I would make it us versus the chef. I'd make it us versus the cooks. And so I come in and go, hey, what's going on? These things are cold. I'm like, that's unacceptable. I'm going to work on that right now. And it was let me, I'd pick up a fry and bite it and go, oh my God, that is cold, or whatever. And it was all of us versus them. And I would come in with that positive upbeatness to hopefully capture the table. And there's still going to be people that are negative, but I would be positive back, without seeming dismissive. And a lot of times that gave me a little bit more control over the outcome, which ultimately did reduce my stress. But be aware of compassion fatigue. It is a real thing. You have to rejuvenate. You have to withdraw. I think Nick's totally right. And then I think leaning in on the person as well and not allowing your natural instinct to pull away to affect you, because that's going to continue to perpetuate the same outcome.
Absolutely. And, there's still things that I've learned working in customer service that I still do today as a therapist.
Every day.
A big part of that is for me to be able to find one point of agreement, and that's it.
Get there.
And that's something I learned working in retail, is you just find one thing that you and the customer can relate on and you both agree on.
Yes.
And then you just continue to stack on that and you build off of that.
Yes.
I still use that today as a therapist.
Well, that advice absolutely applies to this. This writer is saying people can be downright rude. Empathize first. Nick talked about this a couple weeks ago or last week, the art of apology, and how what you do is you figure out what it must have felt like for them, and you state that. And because you communicate, oh, I totally get this. Man, this must have been hard. You guys came in here so excited. You waited for 30 minutes to be seated. You got seated. The food came out cold and late. You must just be discouraged and frustrated and hungry. And whenever they hear that you get it, they're like, okay, all right, I don't need to be mean to you. I don't need to punish you so that you understand my emotion. You've already signaled that you get it authentically, and now we're going to get solution focused. So I think that that's a huge takeaway as well, is employ that therapeutic skill of what we call empathy or reflection, reflecting back to the person what you perceive that they're feeling. And I think that goes a long way in calming people down.
Definitely. And the other thing too is I would just reiterate the idea of getting out and doing some new things, because I understand, I've waited tables, I've been a server myself, and I'm not sure if that's exactly what you're doing, but I've worked in retail, I've been a server, and when you have bad days, you just want to go home and do nothing and just veg out on the couch and just unwind. To the best of your ability, I would really encourage you to get out and get active and doing some kind of activity, some kind of club, something else where you're exposing yourself to a new group of people that can, challenge the perception that you've developed about humanity. Who was it? Gandhi? Be the change that you want to see in the world.
Yeah.
So if you want to see more empathy and compassion, display those behaviors, get involved in
You'll
doing
be surprised.
those. Yeah,
people do pick up on them.
Yeah, and then the other thing too is you will be exposing yourself to other people doing the same thing.
Right.
And then it will broaden your horizons.
I think that's great advice. And hey, keep looking up, man. This writer writes in and says, listen, I like the show and I'm pretty discouraged. I'm so glad that you're joining us, and I'm so glad that you're engaging in a therapeutic conversation, and, give yourself permission to have those feels. Don't dismiss them. Don't tell yourself that they don't count or that you're just here to do your job or whatever, or stuffing it. Vent it as well. And that's something that I remember from that industry, was that it was just like, shake it off and get to your next table. And, sometimes I'd go to the back and I'd see another server crying in the freezer, and just letting it out. And that's hard, man. It's raw humanity, and people just abuse you in that industry. And Nick and I see a lot of this in Las Vegas because the hospitality industry is absolutely huge here. But, learn to commiserate with others, practice that self-care like Nick's talking about, broaden that horizon, invoke those reflection skills, those empathic skills to kind of control the situation, lean in. There's a lot of notes there. I know that that's a lot of takeaways, but also just know that what you're feeling is so genuine and so real. And, we just want to authenticate that, and we want to validate what you're feeling because we've both been there and we know what that's like. And, make your paper, boo. Go make that paper, boo. And then just go out and spend some of it on yourself because you've certainly earned it.
Yeah. And then whenever we get Pod Therapy t-shirts, find us and we'll sell you some.
Yeah, we'll sell you a t-shirt with that paper, boo.
Thanks for writing in.
Thanks for writing in. All right, that's all the time that we have for this week's session. Thank you to those who contributed to our show today. We really appreciate it. Remember, Pod Therapy isn't something you should keep all to yourself. Help us reach others by sharing this episode. You can find us on Facebook at facebook.com/podtherapy or on Twitter @podtherapyguys.
Do you want to add your own advice to today's questions? Post your thoughts at podtherapy.net and join the conversation. I'm Nick Tangeman.
I'm Jim Jobin.
Thanks, and we'll see you for your appointment next week.